Begin. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our final exam review session for History 101. Right? Hopefully everyone here is okay with being recorded, and I am happy to take your questions. I just wanted to emphasize, the format of the exam is the same as the midterm. It is not cumulative, by the way. The in-class part of the exam is everything from the midterm on, so from Iran up. And you will have plenty of time. Essentially, we'll give you a 2-hour time frame. It's more than enough. So you will not, I don't think there'll be any issues with time being a problem. Let's see, am I forgetting any nuts and bolts type things here? Please bring blue books as you did for the midterm. Okay, I've got more people coming here. I'm omitting people as we go along here.
How you doing over there?
So bring blue books. The format is the same as the midterm. For the take-home exam, that's the one instance where you might want to, in fact, I would encourage you to draw on information prior to the midterm. I wouldn't say it's necessarily quote unquote cumulative, but I think, we'll be looking for a little bit of a broader coverage on the take-home essay, something to include it, maybe at least one source or one topic, one country from before the midterm for the take-home essay. And make sure you only choose one topic, right? Again, that was a problem. That's been a problem in the past. One of those 3 topics. Don't try to do all 3 of them. Believe me, it dilutes the effectiveness of the essay significantly if you try to do that. So just do the one topic, the one that you choose. I'm probably forgetting some sort of nuts and bolts type things, but let me just turn it over to you guys to see what specific questions you may have at this time. And we'll just kind of take those as we did for the last time we did this.
I have a quick question.
Jenna,
is the exam
you?
at 10 or what time is the exam again?
The exam is at noon. There's the nuts and bolts question for you. Thank you for reminding me. Yes, that's an important one. We're in our same room as always. And yeah, that can be confusing because class is always at 10, but this is the university, officially set exam schedule. And of course, it's worked around other classes and other exams. So we are at noon on Monday, this coming Monday, May the 2nd. Thank you, Jenna, for asking that very important question. Other questions? Sure, equally or more, even more important, perhaps? No? Well, we can't wrap up already. We just started. Right? Got to be a few questions out there, right?
I have a question.
Thank you, Naya. Go right ahead.
Can we go over Ayatollah Khomeini?
Ayatollah Khomeini?
Yeah.
We certainly can. Yes, we can. Help me out here, folks. Who was Ayatollah Khomeini? What did he do? What country? Yeah, let's start with our formula. Remember our formula: who, what, when, where, and why, or significance, right? We always want to think about that formula. So who is Ayatollah Khomeini? Let's start with that very basic question. I'll throw it back out to you guys. No? Come on now. Some of you know that. I guess it was a while ago since we did Iran, right after the midterm.
It says it served for a small group of Ulanda Islamic clerics. I don't know if I said that right.
Islamic clerics, right? The Ayatollah Khomeini, right? That was the question, right? Nia or Naya? Naya.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Nia.
Nia. No, I had it right.
That was the question.
Ayatollah Khomeini was a key lead. Yeah, Ayatollah is a term of respect for which branch of Islam, by the way, do you call, and what country is Ayatollah Khomeini from? People are doing something in my kitchen. I apologize for the noise. Come on now, y'all know which country Ayatollah Khomeini is from, right?
Iran?
Yes, thank you, Ashanti. So he is a Islamic cleric, very good, Ashanti, from Iran, which would make him Shia, because remember, Iran is predominantly Shia, and he was the leader of the 1979 Islamic Revolution that overthrew the Shah of Iran. So the who is Islamic cleric, where obviously is Iran, the when is 1979, but you could go back a little bit even earlier than that. And this is where the different IDs link together. He was a harsh critic of the Shah's White Revolution. Remember that one? The White Revolution as one of the possible choices, the reforms that the Shah had tried to implement that actually backfired and made things much worse than when they started. And Ayatollah Khomeini had become a very harsh critic of those reforms, even back at the beginning in the early 60s. And over time, he became the focus point of the main opposition to the Shah as a religious figure, a leading religious figure. And then he was the leader of the Islamic Revolution in 1979 that overthrew the Shah's regime and installed the system that's still very much in place there, the Islamic Republic of Iran, that is very, fundamentalist Islamic government-ish, right? More or less. Does that help, Nia?
Yeah, that does help.
I mean, we could certainly add to that, right? But I think that covers really the main points. Him as a critic of the Shah's White Revolution. That's really sort of where he gets his chops, so to speak, or earns his chops as a key opposition leader. And then he emerges as leader of the 1979 revolution that overthrows the Shah. Then after that, he becomes the leader of the newly formed Islamic Republic of Iran until his death in the late 80s, 89. And I think the significance, just to follow through on that, is, he really emerged as the leader of the world's first Islamic revolution, of something that we had never seen before in history, right? There was a very unique type of revolution that happened in Iran in 1979 with the Islamic revolution being a fundamentalist Shia Islamic movement coming to power. Nothing like that had ever happened before. So that's a good one to get us kind of warmed up here. A good start, right? Sydney, I see. Oh, yes, there you are. Sydney, you had a question?
Yes. So for the identifications where we had to choose 5, is there anything, well, I don't know if you're allowed to tell us this, but is there anything that might not be on there?
Oh, yeah, there's a whole lot of them that won't be on there because there's only going to be 8 on there. So let's see if we can perhaps, it's not letting me go to the list. Have either of you got the list handy by chance?
I do.
I'm trying to go to this. Let me see if it'll let me go to the, actually, if I can share screen. Should have brought that up. Sorry, I did not. I brought up several things, but I did not bring up the sample midterm. That was kind of stupid, wasn't it? So let me find the sample midterm here. And yes, our sample final. I always make that mistake. Okay, so we have the sample final. Now, let me see if it'll let me share. Here we go. The sample final exam. All right, can everyone see the document on the screen? The sample final exam on the screen. Can folks see that?
Yes.
Okay, good. So we can go down. Oh, that says December the 8th. That's the part that's wrong. If that's well, I can tell you this already. Ayatollah Khomeini is not going to be one of the IDs. We just covered Ayatollah Khomeini, but that's not going to be on there, right? Just so you know, Mohammad Zarqawi is not going to be on the exam. Let's see, maybe we can eliminate 1 or 2 more here. Make sure I don't, I'm afraid I might say something wrong here, but I'm pretty, Salvador Allende will not be on the exam. So that takes out 3, and that brings us down to 20, right? We can come back to this as needs be, but hopefully that helps at least a little bit. Ooh. Yeah. Oh, okay. That was the wrong thing I brought up. So yes, the things that I just said are correct. So yeah, every little bit helps, right?
Can we go over the the Zionist movement?
We certainly can. We certainly can. Okay. Who wants to start with that one? I always like to throw these out to you guys because you guys should know these things by now. So let's start with the Zionist movement.
For the Zionist movement, it was led by Herzl,
Theodore Herzl, very good.
who established their homeland, the Jewish homeland in Palestine. They
In
raised
Palestine,
money.
right? Mhm.
Yeah, they raised money among the European Jews through the Jewish National Fund. And then
Excellent.
they gradually bought land in Palestine cheaply from absentee Arab landlords.
Superb, superb, Nia. And the only thing I think I missed in that was the time period, which is, by the way, very broad in this case. The Zionist movement is really kind of still sort of around.
The 19th century.
Yeah, it begins in the mid 19th century, and it really, I think you would want to, as far everything you said, by the way, Nia, was perfect, and you'd want to, I think, cap that off with the significance being the formation of independent Israel in 1948, in the immediate, soon after World War II, or late 40s, or however, I'm being real sticklers for dates, but you want to be in the ballpark, right? 1948 is the official date, the official year of the formation of Israel. And that would be, I think, the significance of the Zionist movement. It actually works to form the independent state of Israel in the post-World War II period, late 40s. So that's a good one. That was an excellent response, by the way, Nia. Any other specific identifications folks had questions on?
Can you go over Operation Ajax again?
Certainly, yeah. And that one's maybe a little trickier. We talked about it in class, of course, and we had the notes, but it also came, a lot of it, from the internet assignment that we did, if you will recall. So let me again throw that out to folks. What would you put? What is the significant, who, what, when, why, where, significance of Operation Ajax? I think it's a very important one, by the way.
Well, it pertains to the prime minister of Iran. They were trying to basically overthrow him. That was a big part of it. I don't remember the specific dates. I got to keep studying that a little bit.
Mossadegh is the prime
Mossadegh.
minister, and
Yes.
the date is 1953. Early 50s would be fine, right? Okay, Sydney, you're on track there. Perfect. You want to keep going with it? Oh, I didn't hear the country. I mean, I sense that you know the country, but where does it take place?
Yeah, I got to keep studying that one a little bit. That was still confusing.
Okay. Somebody else recall where Operation Ajax took place?
Was it Iraq?
Iran.
Iran.
Yeah, exactly. So it's the where is Iran, the when is 53, early 50s. The what, I don't know if we've was that Sydney more or less got that, which was, well, who, we didn't get the real explicit part of it. Somebody else help me out here. What happened in Operation Ajax? Sydney basically said it, but just to flesh it out a little bit more, who were the instigators of what happened, and who were the instigators of what happened?
Weren't they trying to nationalize like Iran's oil?
Very good. Mossadegh, thank you, Ashley. Mossadegh nationalized Iran's oil, which put him at odds, especially with the British, who controlled the country's oil, but also with the United States, mainly because they were worried about nationalization being a form of communism. It was sort of for the British, it was all about the oil. For the US, it was about oil too, but it was about communism, fear of communism, right? So very good, Ashley. Iran, 53, Mossadegh, in response to Mossadegh's nationalization of the country's oil. So what happens? What was the actual operation, I guess? And I know, again, Sydney mentioned it, but just to be very clear, what happened in Operation Ajax?
The CIA supplied $35,000 to Zadeh, and SIS supplied $25,000. I
Right.
think that was to pay.
Yeah, I mean, they overthrew Mossadegh, right?
Yeah, they asked
those are
Shah
the
to,
kinds of specifics I wouldn't worry too much about, like how much money, although it is important, I agree, Carter. The CIA overthrew the democratically elected government of Mossadegh because he had nationalized the country's oil. And I think you were getting ready to say it, Carter. Who did they restore to power?
they helped gain support for Zadeh?
Zahedi, yeah, is the prime minister. That's true. That's correct. Now that's a little bit probably too much detail. I mean, you're by all means welcome to include that, and that is correct. But who was the monarch or the overall ruler that benefits from this, from Operation Ajax? It's the Shah of Iran. Zahedi,
Shah,
to be clear,
yes.
was the prime minister who under the Shah who replaced Mossadegh.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
Okay, I see.
really, you're right about that. That is absolutely correct. But it's really the Shah who winds up benefiting a lot from it.
Oh, okay.
And then the other kicker is that after the operation, US companies get a 50-50 share of Iran's oil, along with British companies. And the Shah remains in power for another 26 years. He's the same guy who's overthrown by Ayatollah Khomeini in 1979, as we started that one with that example. So I think for that one, if you want to go to the why or the significance long term, you would want to link Operation Ajax to the 1979 revolution, because they are definitely very clearly linked. So
Okay, so I guess for Mossadegh's identification, if he's on there, we could bring up Ajax too. That would be
absolutely, yeah, I
yeah.
think, and that's why again these are so overlapping, and it's clearly I'm not going to include Mossadegh and Operation Ajax. Right? That would be redundant for the very reason that you just pointed out, Sydney. I will tell you, in fact, that Mohammed Mossadegh will be one of the choices. Of course, he's also one of our slide IDs. And that will be one of the choices for the 8 if you want to plan on doing that one. And the answer that we get in Sydney, you're absolutely right. You couldn't answer Operation Ajax without mentioning Mossadegh, and you can't answer Mossadegh without mentioning Operation Ajax. Right? They're interlinked here.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead, Ashley.
It's kind of random, but like when we were like going over like certain topics, you had mentioned like some that would be on the exam.
That's
like,
right, in class. Yeah.
okay. So they'll still be on the exam, right? Like you mentioned Suez Canal crisis that would be on the
That will
exam.
be on the exam. Yes, indeed.
Okay.
Do we want to do that one, by the way? That's a good one, because it's
Yeah.
the
You
reason I
can
was
if you
like,
want.
what's that?
I said you can talk about it if you want.
You guys probably got that one covered. The reason I like including that one is because it has a very clear cut long-term, significance, or the points. We ended our discussion of that one with several very clear points of why this was significant. Did someone want to get us started with then? Carter, did I see you, since you're unmuted, do you want to get us started on the Suez Canal crisis?
Sure, I can do that.
Okay, what country? Should be pretty clear cut, right? Where?
The Suez Canal.
Is in Egypt, right?
Yes, that was in Egypt.
Right?
Was that near the Gulf Wars?
No, it really predates the Gulf Wars. And actually that's that. So we got the where, it's Suez Canal in Egypt. So what is the when? It was during, like there was a lot going on at the time, but it predates the Gulf Wars by quite a bit. Anybody?
Oh, okay.
Oh, I think it's like. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
That's okay. Go ahead, Jenna.
Hold on. Sorry.
I found it.
Oh, it's 1956.
1956. Very good. And it actually coincided almost exactly with the Soviet invasion of Hungary at the same time. So it was a very tense time in the world, sort of like now, with all that's going on. So so it's 1956. Who's the, by the way, Egyptian leader, and what?
Gamal Nasser.
Nasser. Very good.
Nasser.
Abdul Nasser. Very good. And what does he do? Once again, gets back to a common theme here that we've already discussed in the context of Iran and Operation Ajax. what does he do that prompts the Suez Canal?
Nationalizes the canal.
Nationalizes the canal. Very good, very good. So what happens in response to his decision to nationalize the canal?
Britain, France, and Israel
Mhm.
invaded Egypt in October 1956, but failed to retake control of the canal.
Excellent, and actually wound up damaging it to some degree. Very good. And so that then leads to this sort of standoff, and the Western ally, the British, French, and Israelis are forced to kind of back down and withdraw their troops. And there's a couple of key long-term significance points that we went over. Does anybody, Carter, do you want to go over those since you've been doing this one?
Sure, the crisis, it increased nationalism and
In
anti-West
the Arab
feelings.
world, but specifically in Egypt particularly, right? Very good.
Mhm. It also marked the demise of European control and rise of US influence.
Excellent, very good. And sort of along with that, the emergence of the Cold War as being more important than colonialism.
Mhm.
Really kind of showed that the good old days of colonialism were on the way out, right? Excellent. That's a very good one. And to your original question, Ashley, yes, it will be one of the choices, just like I said in class. I wouldn't say that and then not do it. Other questions?
I had a quick question.
Mhm.
So there was an image of skeletal remains.
Correct. That was the
Was that-
bonus. That's the bonus ID that we added Friday, Wednesday, I guess. Well, recently. Those were, and actually I was going to see, do folks want me to show the slides IDs yet again?
Please.
We've been over them so many times, but it never hurts to go over them again. So let's see if it'll let me. Okay. Oh, not that. No. Okay, good. Who is this?
Mossadegh.
Mossadegh.
So he's going to have a pretty significant presence on the exam, right? Which side in the Arab-Israeli conflict blew up the King David Hotel in Jerusalem?
Jewish terrorists.
What two countries signed the Camp David Accords in 1978?
Israel and Egypt.
Very good. Very good. Who is this famous South African protester burning his past in 1959?
Mandela.
Mandela. I keep thinking
Excellent.
Muhammad Ali for some reason. Mandela.
He does look like Muhammad Ali, and vice versa. Muhammad Ali looks like, and Morgan Freeman, the actor, he played Mandela. It was like the perfect
Oh, he
role.
did.
Yeah.
In a movie called Invictus, which is actually a pretty good film about rugby in the early 90s after the end of apartheid when Mandela was president. Morgan Freeman played it very well, I must say. Oh, got somebody else coming in here. What country is this image from?
Rwanda.
Rwanda.
And then the one, Carter, that I think you're asking. Oh, I didn't put it on here. Oh,
Rwanda?
this is Rwanda.
Rwanda. There we go.
Rwanda. And I apparently did not include the bonus slide on the PowerPoint that I have here, but you're right. It showed skeletal remains. And the question being, same as this question, what country is this from? And the answer is?
Guatemala.
Thank you, Ashley.
Guatemala. Yeah.
Guatemala. Very good. Okay. And we can go over these again at some point if folks feel the need to do so, but I'd say you about got that. Definitely that will now be the 12 easiest points of counting the bonus.
I have a question.
Sure.
Well, two of them actually. Can you go over Interhamwe?
Interahamwe, sure. Yeah.
Yes.
You
And
wanna-
then the Cuban Missile Crisis. I think I know I have it in my notes, but I don't remember.
Okay, we can definitely go over those two. Let's start with the Interahamwe, right? And I think that is a particularly important one, by the way. Right? So tell me somebody what you would put for an answer on that one. Let's start with the where. What country, when we talk about Interahamwe, what country are we talking about?
Rwanda.
Rwanda, thank you. And then therefore the when, ballpark at least. Somebody? It's
I
the
have the 90s.
mid-90s, very good, Nia. It's the 1994 genocide in Rwanda. And so Um, Sam, I'll see if I can find that slide. Apparently I'm at the house and I don't have that one on my computer here for some stupid reason. But I'll see if I can find it. Ooh, yeah, it would be in my notes on Guatemala. So let's finish Interahamwe, but don't let me forget to come back and see if I can find the Guatemala slide. So who are they, or the what? What are the Interahamwe?
Is it militiamen?
Yeah, exactly. And which of the specific groups within Rwanda do they represent or make up? Which group makes up the Interahamwe?
Is it the Hutu?
Hutu. Very good, very good. And it was sort of like, as we talked about in class, kind of a perfect storm almost that led to their formation. And there was a long-term rise of Hutu nationalism in the country, but it comes to a head really in the early 90s because of a number of factors, what are some of the key factors here?
The two groups were the Hutu and the Tutsis, right?
Hutu and the Tutsi, very good. The Hutu are a majority.
They thought the Tutsis were above the Hutu, like they were
very good. That's the long-term, excellent, Carter. If you look at it from like the long term, the Tutsi had been the preferred privileged elite during the colonial period, working with the Belgians. Not all of them necessarily, of course, and there was a lot of intermarriage and all those things we talked about. But the Tutsi let's put it this way, the Belgians had created the Tutsi construction of race, as we talked about in class, as a more privileged group and gave them an advantaged position. And some Tutsi took that and ran with it, right? So that caused resentment. And that's the long-term factor that we talked about, resentment from the point of view of the Hutu. And then there's some economic turmoil going on here in the early 90s as well. A couple of things contributing to that, which are, Ashley?
Wasn't one of them of the collapse of coffee prices?
Very good. I'd say that is probably the most important one, is the collapse of coffee prices on the international market, primarily due to the increased supply of adding Vietnam as a major coffee producer in the world market. And so the price goes down. It has a devastating impact on a lot of small farmers, Hutu coffee farmers with just a small amount of land, trying to kind of eke out a living, suddenly find themselves in economic just dismay, to put it mildly. Add to that the fact that Rwanda was the most densely populated country in Africa, and really one of the most densely populated countries in the world. And also the fact that a few years prior, in 1990, the RPF, the Rwandese Patriotic Front, had invaded the country. So there's an ongoing civil war, which of course always increases tensions and hostilities and also has a negative impact on the economy, right? So you put all these things together, the long-term factors that Carter was talking about, the coffee factor that Ashley mentioned, the civil war, the population density, and you really have potential, as unfortunately happened, for this sort of genocidal explosion of 1994. And the Interahamwe are the Hutu militias, mostly made up of farmers whose livelihoods had been decimated by the economic situation, recruited by these Hutu nationalists to carry out the genocide, which they obviously did. Interahamwe literally means those who fight together, by the way, just as a little tidbit there. It's 1994, Rwanda, the Rwandan genocide. That's a good one to know. Other questions?
I wanted to ask about the Zionist movement. That was in the late 19th century, wasn't that when Jews
Right,
and,
yeah, we did that one, didn't we?
we
Yeah, we
did.
did.
But that's okay. We can go over it again real quick. Late 19th century forms in Europe as a response to reaction against rise of anti-Semitism in Europe.
It was led by Theodore Herzl.
Theodore
right?
Herzl, very good. And of course, the goal, you probably know all this anyway, Carter. The goal is to establish a Jewish homeland. Ultimately, they choose Palestine because of its it was the site of the original Jewish homeland. And we more or less wrapped that one up with, I mean, there's a whole lot of detail one could go into, obviously, but we said the long-term significance of that one, of course, is the culmination of the fulfillment of the dream, which was the establishment of an independent Israel in 1948.
Oh, okay.
Zion is an ancient Hebrew term for Jerusalem, by the way, from which it takes its name. Some of these things I probably didn't put on the overhead, I realized, by the way. But I mean, that's a little tidbit worth noting, I suppose.
Can you also go over the Cuban Missile Crisis?
Yes, Jenna, thank you. And also, don't let me forget, Sam, I want to go back and find that Guatemalan slide. Cuban Missile Crisis. So again, let me ask you guys. I guess the where is pretty obvious, right? It's Cuba. What about the when? You don't have to give me an exact year. Give me a time frame. 62. It's President Kennedy. Remember, he's only in there for 3 years before he gets assassinated. So that makes it easier. 62. Anybody remember sort of the what happens, what unfolds? This was our last lecture, so you haven't had as much time to, I guess, digest it. But on the other hand, it should be fresh on your memory, right? What happened exactly?
Was it the part where after the Bay of Pigs, the Soviet role
Yes.
in Cuba increased? In October 1962, the U.S. detected the construction of a Soviet missile site in Cuba.
Yep.
That
We
thing,
did.
and then Soviets agreed to withdraw the missile site from Cuba, and the U.S. agreed never to invade Cuba and to withdraw its nuclear missiles from Turkey.
Wow, that is perfect. That is
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I had the right thing.
You sure do, Jenna. That is spot on. That is exactly it. It's and I'm glad you brought up, by the way, the Bay of Pigs, because that is very much, this is once again sort of interlinking here. You would want to mention the Bay of Pigs as a precedent, because it was the Bay of Pigs that literally, indirectly, if not directly, you're going to make a case, I guess, led to the Cuban Missile Crisis, because of the U.S. attempt to invade and overthrow the Castro government. That's why the Soviets then began building this, constructing this missile site in Cuba, which the U.S. spy plane discovers. And there's the standoff. Jenna answered it perfectly, actually. The standoff in which the Soviets eventually back down. And the agreement is the Soviets will withdraw the missile site. The U.S. will promise never to invade Cuba again, and also to withdraw recently placed, rather outdated, but still nonetheless nuclear devices that had been put in Turkey just a couple years prior, and upset the Soviets greatly too, because Turkey is right on their border, just like Cuba is only 90 miles away from Florida, right? And I think the significance on that one would be just shows the tense and heightened moment, a very intense heightened moment of the Cold War. It just shows how significant the Cold War had become. I mean, we were on the brink of a potential nuclear conflict at the time. And clearly that was one of those real intense moments of the Cold War. And so, yeah, go ahead.
It's kind of a random question.
Yeah. Oh, Ashley, I was trying to figure, and Hannah, I saw you had your hand up too, but Ashley, you go, and then we'll get Hannah in here. And while you're asking Hannah or Ashley, I'm going to look and see if I have my Guatemala notes on here. Gosh, but go ahead.
I think you mentioned befome, but is the take-home essay and the final exam 2 different grades?
Yes.
Or are they combined in one? Okay.
They are 2 different grades. The take-home essay is 10% of your overall grade, to hopefully make that clear. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yes.
So
thank you.
it's just a 10% chunk of your overall grade. Let's see if I can.
Wait, so is it more than the final exam or like less?
No, the in-class part of the final is 15% of your
okay.
overall grade. Yeah, and
Thank you.
the take-home essay is 10%. Let's see. It's taken me a while, but I think I might have found that.
I wanted to ask how many topics can we have if we choose option one? I don't know if you said it earlier and I just missed
Oh,
it.
yeah. You mean how many themes, in other words?
Yeah, like how many themes could you choose?
Because
from
there's a
that?
lot in there, right?
Yeah,
I
I
would
decided to choose
say,
3. I don't know if that was too much.
I was going to say three is kind of you don't want to go any more than 3. And I think that's probably a good number to go with. 3 makes a lot of sense. And Hannah, you had your hand up before, or you raised your Zoom hand, right? I want to make sure and get you in here.
Yeah, so okay, so the question that I had for you was, can you go over like a little bit the white revolution? I don't know if you talked about that, but
No, we did
it's
not. We talked
okay.
around it, but we haven't actually talked about it. So let's talk about it. Somebody help me out here. What is the white revolution? And actually, I tell you what, we'll do that. But before we do that, I want to show, because there were a couple of questions. I want to I'm bringing up Guatemala here for that slide. That will be the bonus slide. Oh, boy, it's always at the end, isn't it? Sorry. There it is. Okay. So let me now go and share. But Hannah, we will come back. Don't let me forget here. We're going to do White Revolution. So can everyone see this? Oh, no.
Oh yeah.
That is not what
Yes,
I wanted to do. Oh, boy. I just goofed on. Here we go. Okay. Everyone can see that, right? That is the
Yep.
image. I think Sam, you had asked, and Carter, you had asked. This is the image that will be the bonus for the slide IDs. Guatemala is the answer. What country is this image from? Okay. So with that, let me stop share here. Oh no, definitely want to share. So White Revolution, right? Help me out here. Who can tell me some good things about the White Revolution? First of all, the where does it take place?
Is it Iran?
Yes, it is, Jenna. Thank you. It is in Iran. And the win is a little
1963.
okay. It starts in 63. Excellent, Jenna. And it lasts over a fairly long period of time, but we haven't gotten to the what. So what is it?
Is it where the Shah began this reform policy to build up the industry, liberate women,
Yep.
and establish civil law codes in place of religious laws,
Excellent.
and carry out land reforms?
Yes, very good. He wanted to modernize the country. Exactly. Is he doing this though of his own volition, or who's kind of instigating it? It's really U.S. advisors. The Kennedy administration is strongly encouraging him to do this as their interpretation of containment. They feared that communism spread off of poverty. So where you have poverty, you have the threat of communism. So the best way to overcome communism is to alleviate poverty. So they're strongly encouraging the Shah, who eventually buys into it. And, they're not entirely forcing it on him. I don't want to give the wrong impression there. They are strongly encouraging him, and he eventually kind of champions it and buys into it. So does it alleviate poverty? The White Revolution, what's the long-term effect and significance?
It increases disparities between rich and poor in Iran, thereby undermining social stability.
Exactly. It has the exact opposite effects over time from what the Kennedy advisors had hoped and what the Shah had hoped. It actually increases disparities between rich and poor. And there's, of course, a lot of complex reasons for that, some of which we talked about in class. Really, the main factor is that the land reform is a disaster because poor peasants who agree to accept land find that they cannot irrigate the land, and the landowners will not help them irrigate it or buy them equipment necessary to it, or loan money to them so that they could buy the equipment to irrigate. So it winds up leading to a mass migration. Really, 8% of the rural population annually between 65 and 75 move from the countryside to the cities. And there they face just utter desperate poverty because they have no employment for the most part. Some might scratch out a job here and there, but they're facing just terrible circumstances in these shanty towns on the outskirts of the major cities. And so all of this, and then thus the significance of the White Revolution is that it actually contributes to the downfall of the Shah and the 1979 Islamic Revolution that we've already discussed and talked. In fact, we've done a lot on Iran, which is great. Ayatollah Khomeini, Operation Ajax, 1979 Revolution, and White Revolution. Right, sort of all these things are very intertwined. Let's put them more chronologically. Mossadegh, who was, of course, overthrown in the 1953 Operation Ajax. The White Revolution begins a decade later in 1963, lasts so about 15-ish years, but it has a disastrous consequences that culminate in the 1979 Islamic Revolution led by Ayatollah Khomeini, who, by the way, as we talked about, had been a harsh critic of the White Revolution. That's where he sort of gains his reputation as an outspoken critic of the Shah's regime. So yeah, that's a very good overview of Iranian history we've had here this evening, which is great because Iran was the first country we did after the midterm, so it's been a while. It's good to review.
Can you also go over Jacobo Arbenz?
Arbenz, yes, again, excellent one. Jacobo Arbenz. Let's talk about the what, when, where, why, and what, when, or let's start with the where. Where is he? Jacobo Arbenz. Now that's one of the more recent countries we talked about, so it should be fresh, relatively fresh on your minds, right?
Guatemala.
Guatemala. Thank you, Amaris. He's in Guatemala. And what about the when? When is he, prevalent, and what does he try to do? It's a kind of familiar story that we ran into a lot, especially in the second half of the semester. When is he? Let's start with the when. We know the where, Guatemala. He's late. I'm sorry, Amaris, go ahead.
In 1950.
Yeah, or late 40s, early 50s. Let's go with early 50s, exactly. And so, Amaris, I'm going to call on you. What does he do that, leads? Why did we even talk about him? What did he do? Go ahead, Carter. Or was that you, Carter?
Yes. Okay. In 1951, Guatemalans elected Jacob Arbenz, a spiritual socialist. He was a socialist.
Yeah.
Spiritually, he sped up the pace of land reform and allowed the Communist Party to operate openly.
Excellent. Very good. Amaris, what happened, or what does he do? And I don't mean to put you on the spot here, Amaris, but it just seemed like you knew what you were talking about there. But what does he do that puts him at odds with a major US-based corporation? Anybody? Yeah, go ahead, Amaris.
Give the land back to the peasants.
Okay, and taking it from, part of it from, I'm sorry?
U.S. business people.
U.S. business people, one company.
The United Fruit Company.
United Fruit Company, yes. Kudos to whoever said that. I think, was that you, Amaris? Yes, he takes land from the United Fruit Company, which was this massive land-owning U.S.-based corporation, of course, owned roughly a third of the land in Guatemala, left much of it untilled, by the way. And in fact, the agrarian reform law, which of course is also one of the possible choices for the IDs, you see how these things overlap and interlink, right? You couldn't do Arbenz without doing that one, and you can't do that one without doing Arbenz because they're so closely linked here. And the agrarian reform law called for the nationalization of land not in use. Any land that was being used was exempt from the reform law. But the company had long followed a policy of buying up unused land to keep it out of the hands of its competitors. So that's how it got to be such a huge, massive landhold. Roughly 1/3 of the country's land is owned by the United Fruit Company. The agrarian reform law passed by Arbenz nationalized much of that land. The company was hit very hard. He offered compensation based on their tax statements. It's all those things we talked about in class. But of course, it led to a bit of a showdown of sorts in which what happens ultimately to Arbenz? What is his ultimate fate?
Castro killed him, took him over. They took him out of power.
No, not he's overthrown, yes, but not by Castro. Castro is Cuba, right? This is Guatemala. There is a
He
link, though, Carter.
was-
There is a definite link. So I'm glad you mentioned, but not in the way that you said. Ashanti, I saw you were going to comment. What happened to Arbin?
He was overthrown by Castillo, I think.
Castillo Armas with a little help from
America.
the United States and the CIA.
Okay.
They trained Guatemalan exiles on, in fact, this is well documented, on land in United Fruit Company land in neighboring Honduras. They provided, the Eisenhower administration provided air cover for the.
She on the Zoom for studying.
I'm sorry? Oh. The Eisenhower administration provided 2 planes to give air cover to Castillo. Ashanti was correct that it was Castillo Armas's invasionary force that moved into Guatemala to overthrow Arbin's, and the officer corps there wavered, but eventually decided to side with Castillo Armas against Arbin's, and that pretty much sealed his fate. So he was overthrown again. The year after Mossadegh, 53 is Mossadegh, 54 is Arbin's. Very similar scenario, a freely democratically elected leader being overthrown by a CIA engineered coup because the United States didn't like their policies, basically, and specifically because of the United Fruit Company in this case, right? And the long-term significance of it, and I think this is where Carter, I will say you were on the right track, is Castro learned a valuable lesson from what happened in Guatemala in 54, so that when he came to power, he knew not to keep the officer corps intact. And in fact, he completely, more or less, purged the old officer corps, replaced it with people loyal to him, so that there would not be a repeat as there almost was. Bay of Pigs was modeled on the operation of Guatemala 7 years earlier. It was meant to basically be the same thing. So you're all right to make that connection, Carter. It was just the connection was a little off.
I see what you mean.
Yeah. Does that make sense, everyone? And Laura, I think I saw your, Zoom hand up earlier. Did I see that correctly, or was that someone else maybe?
No, that was me.
Oh,
I just have
okay.
a quick
Okay, so you
question.
had a
Can we
question.
go over one last one? Because I don't really have the right notes for it. It's number 7, roots of the first Gulf War, please.
Okay, sure.
Okay.
Somebody else want to jump in there on that, right? I'm trying
Roots
to,
Gulf War?
because you guys know this stuff. I know you know this stuff. What'd you say, Carter?
The White Roots Gulf War.
The roots of the first Gulf War, right, Laura? That's what you said? Roots of the first Gulf War. So where would we start with that one? It really
Was
comes.
this after like the Iran-Iraq war?
Thank you, Jenna. I was just exactly. So it really, the real roots of it begin with that conflict, the Iran-Iraq war of the 1980s, right? That was a very devastating conflict. And then Jenna, you want to, that ended in 88. So Jenna, you want to kind of flesh that out a bit for us?
Yeah, I can.
Please do.
I said during which Kuwait illegally siphoned oil from the Iraqi side of the Rumelia
Very
oil
good.
field.
Very good. During the Iran-Iraq war of the 1980s, obviously Iraq's attention was diverted in this conflict. So Kuwait took advantage of that did we forget to go over the White Revolution? Hannah, I thought we did. We can come back to it. We'll double back to it. I thought we did the White Revolution.
No, we did.
I thought so.
Oh, wasn't that the one where Kuwait was siphoning oil from Iraqi side?
Siphoning oil from the Iraqi side of the Rumelia oil field. Exactly.
I see what you mean.
So obviously Iraq is not happy about that. After the war ends, they're trying to negotiate some kind of an agreement, but the negotiations are not going well. And then there's another key factor, Saddam Hussein, the Iraqi leader at the time. What is his strategy to rebuild his war-torn country?
He proposed
By
that OPEC.
increasing the prices of oil.
Exactly. I think you both said it at the same time, which you're both correct, which is that he tried to get OPEC to lower the price of oil, to lower production, I should say, which would raise the price of oil on the international market. I got that back.
Hmm.
And then that would help him to rebuild his war-torn country. But the two of the main players, of course, at OPEC, two of the main producers are Saudi Arabia and Kuwait. Do they agree to go along with it? Do they agree to Saddam? No. And then there's one other factor, which, as Jenna mentioned, it's rooted in the Iran-Iraq war. Saudi Arabia and Kuwait had both given Saddam Hussein's Iraq $30 billion, $60 billion total in loans during the Iran-Iraq war. And so after the war, Saddam Hussein is trying to get them to forgive that debt. Do they go along with that idea? No, they do not. So there's this sort of accumulation of factors here that lead Saddam Hussein then to decide to invade his neighboring Kuwait, which of course is a very oil-rich country, to put it mildly. So
I have
those,
a question.
yes, those would be, I would just to clarify, the main roots of the first Gulf War. I think in terms of significance, just to finish that one out quickly, the significance thereof, you might want to note that, oh, and by the way, there was a second Gulf War a decade later in 2003 that started in 2003 that was, came as a result of sort of the unresolved issues of the first Gulf War. So long-term significance, always look for those connections. And I'm sorry to cut you off, Jenna. You were gonna ask the question.
Yeah, you're good. I was just wondering if there's a possibility that you could eliminate one of the options for our short answers. I mean, I know there's only four, but
well, I can tell you one thing for sure. I would be a total jerk to ask you to read a book and not include it on the exam, right? So you can pretty well guess that one will be on there, right? Let's see here. Trying to remember what the short. And I will say, although I'm a huge fan of Paradise Now, that will not be on the exam.
thank you.
You're welcome. Are there any questions with regard to the take-home exam, the essay that is? I think for that you want to make sure you only do one topic. I've said that a bunch of times, I know, but you also want to clarify your terminology. For example, if you do the one that calls for, like I think Sam was asking about earlier, that calls for specific themes, you want to be sure and just briefly define what you mean by the theme you chose, right? Sort of like in class, the day that we did the definition of what terrorism is, or the definition of what the Cold War is. Sometimes it's more important than other times, but you want to be very clear on what you mean by your terms. For example, one of the other questions talks about conflicts in the third world. So you want to be very clear. The third world is basically former colonized countries who received their independence mostly in the 1950s. Right? Fatima, was there a question there? Oh, so you want to be very clear in your terminology. In other words, define your terms, make a very clear thesis statement, just as you did. Remember back on the first paper we did on the Truman's decision to use the bombs on Japan. You want to make a very clear argument based on evidence. So with a thesis statement, draw on the readings to provide evidence to support your argument. Okay.
I have one quick question.
Yes. Who is that?
This is Amaris.
Oh, Amaris, yes.
When we're using, we have to use information from the class. Do we have to cite those specifically or no, since we talked about it in class, like the readings and the books and stuff?
Yeah, you do want to be, well, let's put it this way. You want to be very clear where you're getting your information from. So that can come in a couple of different ways. At this point, I'm still fine with parenthetical references. Like if you use A Long Way Gone, you can just put Bay, B-E-A-H, his last name, comma, and a page number or something like that, right? in parentheses after the reference, after using that particular point. Ideally, you could use footnotes, but I'm not certainly going to require that. I would prefer that, but I'm not going to require it at this point. Next year, I probably will. They're telling us to require these things.
One thing I wanted to ask really quick.
Yeah, Amaris, did you have a follow-up to that, or does that help clarify?
We just need to cite it within the text. We don't have to put
Within the text is fine. Yeah, within the text is fine. And Carter, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say for the take-home essay, if, for example, when we're talking about the Gulf Wars on the slide in class, it says it started in 1990 and ended in 1991. That was in the slides. If I were to put that data in my take-home essay, if that was what I wanted to put in it, would I have to find a website that says that so I can cite it, or can I?
No, absolutely not. I'm glad you asked that. That question came up earlier, actually, I think with Victoria was the very first student here and asked a similar question. And very good point, by the way, because I get this question a lot. You can use and rely on the notes, and indeed encourage you to do so. But the general rule of thumb for citations, so it's a very excellent question, Carter, is if it is something of general knowledge, you do not have to cite a source. So in other words, the first Gulf War was 1990-91. That's general knowledge. And therefore you can just say that without citing any kind of source. And I do get the question a lot, and a lot of students will use the notes as a source. You can certainly do that, but as a general rule, you don't really have to, because I'm basically conveying to you guys what I would call general knowledge, right? Most of what I give you is general knowledge that does not require citing. So,
okay.
You can cite the notes. Let me put it this way. If there's any doubt in your mind, right, you can, or you can go to ideally you wouldn't want to go to some random website though. But for stuff like dates in particular, that's general knowledge. You definitely don't have to cite sources for that. Other questions? Yeah, Jenna, is that you?
Yes. So I know like for like our midterm exam, we got feedback and stuff like that for like our responses for like the IDs and stuff.
Yes.
Will we still get like similar feedback even though
No, unfortunately we just can't because of the time factor involved. Now that said, well, on the midterm you got the sort of a key, right? An answer key, really, right?
Yeah.
We didn't do a whole lot of comments or feedback on those, correct?
I mean, like there was like
little bit, yeah. Well, I would say yes and no. I will tell you because we're required to get the grades in 48, no more than 48 hours after the exams. So there's a lot quicker turnover than there is for the midterm. So, I mean, we will grade them very clearly, very closely and very thoroughly, I assure you, but we don't have as much time to make a whole lot of feedback. But now that said, Jenna, I'm glad you mentioned the midterm and the answer sheets that I gave you. Look those over, if only briefly, skim a few of the IDs to get an idea, the identifications to get an idea of what we're looking for, right? Use that as a study guide, in other words, because then I will be providing the GAs, they'll grade the end part of the exam. I'll help them grade the take-home essays. I've got couple of other classes with a lot of grading. So it's going to be a rough week, but I'm hoping to do at least a third of the take-home essays or so. So we will not be able to do a whole lot of feedback. Now that said, if you have any questions about how we reached the grade that we reached, and or if you want to get your blue book afterwards, I always keep those. We're not required, but I think it's a good policy to keep them for a year. So if anybody wants to come get their blue books next fall or just whenever, by all means, feel free to ask and just come by. We'll set up a time and you can come get them, right? But we won't be able to, the short answer is we will not be able to get the same kind of feedback, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you.
And I saw Ashanti asked, and maybe we can do this before we call it an evening here. But yes, we can eliminate a couple more of the identifications that will not be on the exam. Before we do that, are there any other final issues, questions, comments that anyone may have?
The only question
Uh-huh.
I had was the third slide ID was between Israel and
Egypt.
Israel and Egypt. Thank you.
Yeah, Camp David Accords. And Hannah, yeah, you have a question?
I had a comment real quick.
Sure.
I just wanted to say that this is my first experience in college and it's been kind of stressful, and coming to your class has made it a lot less stressful.
Oh,
And
well, I knew that.
you are a very good teacher, you know your stuff, and I really do appreciate being able to be in your class. It was a lot of fun.
Well, thank you, Hannah. Thank you very much. I love teaching this class. I wonder if probably, maybe I require, you talk about being stressful. Is there too much work in this class?
No, I would say I feel like
No.
So you guys are the good students who always come to class, and I'm going to get a lot of course evaluations telling me it's way too much work for a 101, right? But I don't think it is. I really don't think it is.
I
No,
will say
it's
one
really
thing.
easy.
Yeah.
I will say one thing. I've had many history teachers in the past, and many of them really focused on like the memorization of facts, and it kind of took away from the actual like
Right.
interpretation of history.
Yeah,
basically.
that's my main premise.
yeah, I would have to agree with Carter. Like I don't like history, but I actually learn and actually like retaining the information.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, I mean, to me, that's what made I didn't even like history coming through it, you know, for many years, and then finally I found a good instructor, and it was like, wow. And so this is not just about memorizing; it's about actual, you know, learning why things happen and interpretation. To me, that's the key. So that's why I try to teach it that way.
Mhm.
I feel like you just made it more fun than what other teachers do.
Well, thank you, Ashley. I certainly tried. That said, I don't know, class attendance was like minimal there at the end. I don't know what. I just keep thinking I'm doing something wrong. Right? I don't know if I should. I don't ever want to require attendance now. That's why I appreciate you guys who actually come to class. That's you make me happy. Okay, well, let's eliminate, shall we, two more of the IDs that are not going to be on the exam. I'm looking over the list here.
Can you also give us maybe one that's going to be on there?
Sure. Well, some of the ones we've talked a lot about here, actually. How about Suez Canal crisis? Well, I already told you that one, right? So no, that doesn't count. Okay, roots of the first Gulf War will be one of the options to choose from. And now let me check out the list and eliminate. 1973 war will not be one of the choices. And Bay of Pigs will not. Did I already say that before when I was eliminating things? I don't think I did I? Bay of Pigs will not.
No, you didn't.
Okay. So that should give you a good idea of what is and is not on there and what to expect and not to expect. And I have enjoyed having you guys in class, and we'll see you one more time here on Monday, right?
At 12, right?
12 o'clock, noon.
Okay.
Correct. And
Are there
Laura, can you stay on just a second? Because I think you were going to take it ahead of time, right? Just to confirm that.
Correct.
Sorry,
I'm
Ashley,
taking it tomorrow.
tomorrow at 2:30, correct?
Yes.
Okay, just to make sure. I thought that was the case. And Ashley, you had a question or comment?
Yeah, kind of random. Do you teach any other classes?
I do, yeah. I mean, actually, this has become sort of one of the main classes that I teach, but I also teach a lot of Russian history, mostly. And,
Okay.
and I'm teaching in the fall, I'm teaching this class again and a freshman seminar on the modern Afghanistan, which you guys, you don't have to be a freshman. Anybody who wanted to take it could. I'll make sure you can get in there if you want to take it. I love that class too. And then I teach in next spring, I'll probably be teaching, I hope I'll be teaching my Russian history class again. That one's a lot of fun too. I enjoy that one. Okay.
Professor Jones,
Yeah.
could Could you say the ones that you eliminated again? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
The what time of the exam? Is that what you said?
No, the IDs that you eliminated.
Oh, okay. Let's go through. We eliminated several. Help me out, y'all. Help me remember what we eliminated.
1973 war.
73 War will not be on there.
Bay of Pigs. won't
Bay
be
of
on there.
Pigs will not be on there. Zionist movement, we said that one before, correct? Muhammad Zarqawi will not be on there. Ayatollah Khomeini will not be on there. So some of the ones that we did, but that's okay. It's good practice. And,
You
it's good
said
to know.
Salvador wouldn't be on there either.
And Salvador Allende. Thank you, Amaris. That's right. Salvador Allende will not be one of the choices. Okay. And we also know several that will be on there. So you guys you should be ready to go. Right? And Victoria, you had a comment as well. What was it? Can we go over the first batch of? Oh yeah, we just did, didn't we? Yeah.
Wait, did you say Interhamwe is not going to be on there?
I said actually Interahamwe is one of the ones that will be on there.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. That one will be on there. And I did already say that, I think, right? So yes, that one will be on there. Okay, and we have several days left. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to email me. I'm trying to stay on top of my email during this stretch as much as I can. And I'll be happy to take any questions. All right. Anything else? Okay.
No, that's all. Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you
And
so
I will
much.
see you on Monday at 2:00. Right? Oh, at
Have a
noon,
good
at noon.
evening.
Oh, at noon. Okay.
Okay.
See y'all.
See you.